I'm calling Tracy Martin.
Speaker, for a moment there I thought the whole conversation about this very important bill was going to draw to a very rapid close. So I appreciate the call. Thank you very much. Mr Speaker, New Zealand First did support the bill with the amendments inside the Select Committee, because the Select Committee was it's a very collegial Select Committee. It's well chaired by Dr Cam Calder. The members try very hard to work together to create legislation, to have things that come out of the Select Committee that are the benefit of all New Zealanders. So it was very unfortunate that at the end of the day there were two main pieces inside the bill that we could not support. We are happy to see the amendments made around NZQA. There was quite of the submitters that provided verbal submissions to us as well as their written submissions. There were several that had major concerns about NZQA and the way that the bill was written in the first instance, whereby possibly NZQA could start making some dictatorial comments or have influence over the people inside the governance structure of the ITOs. And it was made very, very clear to the Select Committee that the ITOs must be governed by people that come out of their industries. That they must be directed and have that continual link back to the industries that they are providing the training for. So the amendment was made to make sure, and NZQA, I believe, were very supportive of the amendment, because it was not their intention to get into the area of trying to handpick people who should govern, but merely to make sure that the structure of that governance is solid, so that the qualifications delivered and the service delivered by the ITOs can be relied upon, can be a high trust model for parents, for apprentices and for the businesses for which that they train the future workforce. It was very interesting for a moment when I was listening to the new Minister Sam Lotuinga read from his prepared notes there. I thought I was losing my mind, but I'm pleased to have been supported by Grant Robinson in the fact that actually that was a very clever spin. It was a very clever spin inside the Minister's speech there. I give him many, many points for that. Around the skills provision, around the ITOs retaining, the other area where we have been unable to support was around the skills leadership function being stripped away. Now I say stripped away because of course the ITOs can still do skills leadership if they want to, but nobody's name is on it as a responsibility under this legislation. And the argument of the opposition side is that if nobody's name's on it, who are you going to hold accountable? Now, the only thing we could find inside of the conversation at the Select Committee was that there was some form of cost saving there. We can't find any other reason, and perhaps Mr King will, when he stands to take a call, he will that would be really constructive for the rest of the House as to why we have decided to make nobody responsible for skills leadership now. It was never forbidden for anybody else to do skills leadership, but it was deliberately given to the ITOs that they must do some skills leadership working inside those industries. The other area that we've been unable to support the bill on, and that is around the direct funding for industry training. It's another situation, actually. It's another solution that nobody wanted. Nobody came to the Select Committee to submit that that was something they wanted. It was one of the recommendations out of the 2012 review. Many of the recommendations out of the 2012 review have been implemented, and the Select Committee recognises that. The ITOs recognise that there has been some substantial improvement in the whole area of ITO provision, in the and again, I believe in the trust model that is going to be developed through a more cohesive ITO delivery, PTEs, and with industry itself. But not a single submitter actually came to ask for direct funding. And even the officials mentioned a trial that had been put into place with some businesses, and not one of those businesses at the end of that trial had put their hand up to continue. because it's so complex, because it's actually not something that they want to get into. So again, if nobody wanted it, why does the National Party believe that it needs to be put inside this piece of legislation? And Mr. Calder, Dr. Calder, actually alluded in his short comments on this bill to the reasons that they see it in there. Now, one, yes, it did come out of the review, but just because something comes out of a review and you've got 13 recommendations and you've implemented 11 of them, doesn't mean you have to implement the last one just for the hell of it. And Dr. Calder said that this would provide, and I think the only word to use actually is a threat to ITOs to keep them in line, that this was a provision that could be used by a business if they don't pull their socks up and make sure that they stay on the mark. Now, the fact that those businesses can already complain to the Minister, the fact that those businesses can actually already change the provider if they're unhappy with them, are all mechanisms that are currently in place. So it's a little bit like charter schools. We're having the same conversations we had around charter schools. All that flexibility is still there inside this bill. We don't need another piece of flexibility there. There are already solutions to this particular problem. And it was the view of New Zealand First that this particular clause needed to be held out of legislation. Let the massive changes that have taken place to ITOs and around this provision of delivery, let them bed in. If we need it, there's nothing to stop the House in a 2-year or 3-year period after a review of the current changes to ITOs to actually go back and say, OK, that didn't work, let's add something else. But there has already been a massive restructure. Sir, there's not much else to say really about the bill. We are very, very pleased to see the remove of ageism inside the bill, and we commend the government for that stand. We are disappointed that there is no recognition inside this legislation or any legislation coming into the House that actually there still is a major barrier to the taking on of apprentices for small and medium-sized businesses. And the small and medium-sized businesses are the backbone of the New Zealand economy, particularly in rural areas. And I'm referring to the fact that a hairdresser, for example, has a $500 fee per year per apprentice that they must pay for the privilege of actually taking on a young person or a person of any age now and training them into that industry. And New Zealand First would have liked to have seen some more conversation, some more incentives, some more discussion around if we're asking for more and more of our student body and more of our community to be able to go out and be educated inside the workforce, thereby gaining less debt at the other end. How can we, just through a small provision of removing a barrier like that fee, incentivise small and medium-sized businesses particularly to take on more apprentices? It is our view that those businesses in those communities, particularly rural communities, very much want to participate inside their modern apprenticeship scheme, but that this barrier, and particularly in hard times, as the government keeps pointing out, it's been hard times, particularly in these hard times, that this $500 per year per apprentice is a continual barrier, and that's just one of the ITOs, one of the apprenticeships that this barrier applies to, and there are a variety of fees across the board. So, sir, unfortunately, no matter how collegial the Select Committee was, those two things make it impossible for New Zealand First to support this bill.
I call David Clendon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to take a call on this Industry Training Apprenticeships Amendment Bill. So this is a bill the Green Party would have liked to